Welcome back, everybody, to our last video in our series on the lessons that wrestling taught us. For those of you who have tuned in and watched all of these, I've gotten a lot of nice notes from friends and family members. I appreciate that. The engagement is awesome. Makes us think that we're on the right track. But this is it's a good summary topic. What we're going to be breaking down today is the relation. So it's stated in every wrestling room on the planet, really, that the first period is generally won by the most technically sound wrestler. The second period is generally won by the most conditioned wrestler. And the third person is the one that has the most heart, right? They have the grit, they have the pride, whatever it is backing them, the motivation, but it's their heart that generally drives them to the end game, and they're the one that's the victor of the period, right? And how related that is to life and in business, that's what we're gonna break down today. So any thoughts on that before I give you my thoughts, Ryan?
No, I think that the relation that we spoke about a few minutes ago of the if we were to parallel that to business, really you could parallel it to anything, and break it down into 3 stages more or less. But what I hear is just the most prepared is usually the most successful at the start. Mm-hmm. But in my opinion, usually the people that hyper prepare or spend a bunch of time on a plan or, practice technique frivolously, but skimp on conditioning, right? Mm-hmm. Or maybe think that they have a bit of an air of arrogance around their level of skill, will still get beat out by somebody who just gives a shit more, mm-hmm. right?
This is a stemmed thought, but have you ever been on a trip or part of a group or just involved with somebody with a really type A personality? Like their plan has subcategories to the plan. Their itinerary is broken down from not like concept to concept, but minute by minute, even second by second. And if anything goes wrong, sheer panic, and it changes the mood, right? So if it's a trip, it's no longer a fun trip. Mm-hmm. If it's a project, you're never going to get it done right. It's not going to get done well, so whatever. But you know what I'm referring to?
Yeah, 100%.
I feel like that's maybe one of the big. What I'm gathering from what you're saying is like we did a video on this a couple months back now, but it was the Bruce Lee video, mm-hmm. right? The adaptability, you got to flow, right? I think they're really rigid, and that's one reason. So they've got this plan that's in front of them, but business, just like life, it doesn't give a shit what your plan is at all. Right. You could go in with the best of intentions, with the greatest of plans, and you didn't calculate for that one miscellaneous thing. And that'll break certain people, mm-hmm. right? A technically sound wrestler who's unconditioned, same thing.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's interesting because I had a hour meeting this morning with one of our guys mm-hmm. about this exact thing, right? And unintentionally, right? But I kept kind of digging deeper in his, what I would say is just a bit of neuroticism, mm-hmm. right? And I said, do you think that in some ways you're a little bit OCD, right? And he said, oh yeah. I said, okay, so what is the symptom that we're trying to cure with being maybe a little bit obsessive about details? Right. I said, what would happen if you showed up to work one day and you forgot your lunch and you forgot your sunscreen and you forgot your hand lotion? Mm-hmm. And he said, well, I would panic. And I said, okay, so that's a good starting point. So what if you forgot them and everything was still okay? Mm-hmm. And he was like, how could it be okay if I forgot those things? I said, well, there's other options. You could just go buy one, right? Or you could go a day without them. And what would be the largest consequence you'd face? And he was like, well, I might get sunburned. And I was like, okay,
so I might get hungry.
That's a consequence.
Yeah.
Right. And he was like, and my blood sugar might crash. And I said, right, but we have options for that, right? There's restaurants and gas stations and things all over. I said, so what do you think that this stems from? The sense of over preparedness all the time. And he was like, I'm not sure. And I said, it's a form of self-control, right? Is that you're controlling as many factors as you can so that there's not change, right? And I said, what we need to work on is what happens if those controllable factors are not possible, right? How do we react to that? So my brain reacts to it like, but I'm not a very OCD control-oriented person, but my brain operates like, that's okay, I'll just pick up some lunch somewhere, right? Or I'll probably get sunburned today and it'll probably suck tomorrow, but by 2 or 3 days after I should be fine. But I said that what you're making your Achilles heel is something very, very small, right? And you're introducing chaos into your life because of small things that happen, which then distract you from the end goal, right? So like if we're referencing that back to the technical wrestler in the first period, right? Like what if he shoots for a single leg the same way he shot for a single leg every time with success, but this time he's not successful, right? The competitor, right, oftentimes is going to be like, oh shit, that didn't work, and that always works, right? What do I do now? And that's where, in my opinion, when you see somebody that puts so much focus on one leg, right? If we're talking about a 3-leg stool, that, in my opinion, being obsessive about the small things can sometimes be a crutch. Right, it can be an Achilles heel, which is, you're talking about somebody that's like that on vacation. I don't ever want to go on vacation with that person.
You want to have a good time. Your goal is to have a good time,
right?
Not to get to every piece that you want to.
And well, for me, I look at that and I look at a list like that and I'm like, geez.
There's a lot of obligations.
I was like, this is a lot of stuff that, like, to me, this doesn't look like I'm enjoying myself. It looks like homework, right? So, but yeah, I think if you want to dive in, I think to the responding to what I said as well as maybe the second period type guy, I think that could lend very well to the experiences you've shared just at the level of conditioning that you had to achieve in your wrestling days as well as in business.
Well, my first thought when you were talking about things, I actually remember a conversation I had with one of my coaches in college. He told me, he says, Christian, your biggest problem is you think too much. And, thinking a lot has definitely helped me in certain ways, but it's also extremely hindered me in a lot of ways, right? Like, I don't think I would have jumped off the proverbial cliff of owning a business had I not really been forced, right? So I used to have a business partner, and I used to lean on him for making risky decisions. He was too far to one side, whereas I was too far to the other side. It's like
risk averse.
Yeah, it was like we had to come into the center and then work as a tandem unit, because I would have never jumped off because of all of the millions of things that would have went wrong in my head, and that kind of stuff. And I kind of was just, I had to have that nudge, but it was relatable to this conversation I had with my coach. He goes, I can see on you, as small as it is, when you're wrestling, there's a pause before you begin your next move, right? And I'm a pretty calculated person, so when if I want to do a switch, there's a small pause, and as small as it is at a college level, that has to be pretty small. But it was small enough that these other wrestlers progressed as far as they have. That's where they advanced on me. If I took that one tiny little pause, I lost to the competition. It happened regularly. And it's not that I didn't know what I was doing, it's that I didn't trust that I was going to get there without thinking about it first, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, so in terms of like the first period wrestler, that's their Achilles heel, is that, if the technical doesn't work, what's going to happen next? And that happens in business. If their business plan has any kind of disruption to it, are they going to be able to adapt? That's a different type of character trait. And so then the second period wrestler, and talk about the conditioned wrestler, always wins the second round, because by the people who put their time not only on the mat to learn the technique and in condition with their friend, their friends or whatever, but they're also training year round. They're the ones that actually care that, that they could outlast anybody else. They're going to shine in the second period because these guys are going to slow down just that much more. So instead of it being the gap that causes the problem, it's going to be the fact that they're slower that causes the problem. The conditioned wrestler doesn't lose pace.
Right.
They're always moving forward. That constant, relentless forward pressure applies very much to that second level of wrestler, the conditioned wrestler. I've seen that play in my favor very significantly. So like I've mentioned, I was never really the best wrestler because I wasn't direct focused. I didn't have the horse blinders on. I wanted to do every sport, and I wanted to be great at every sport. And I even chose doing CrossFit after wrestling, not specifically because I loved CrossFit. It was because to me that was, you are becoming great in 5 different areas of fitness at the same time.
Rather than one,
right? So let's tackle everything,
right.
Become the conquering hero in my head, or whatever. But the conditioning side of things definitely helped me win in the second period very regularly, right? So like the first period wrestler usually is won by the most technically sound, and then they're going to be survived. The conditioned wrestler who's not quite as technical, and the guy that has all the heart, they're going to survive into the second or third round.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a technical person, maybe they haven't been conditioned enough, or maybe they just don't have the heart for it, and they're going to start to taper off. And I see that in business a lot too. There's a lot of people that come in with great plans and they have investment capital. I didn't have any investment capital, so therefore we had a model of business to work off of, but we didn't have this damn plan written down. We were like let's build the plan as quiet type of folk. We've done pretty darn well in my personal opinion, but at the same time, if we had the plan written down, I think I personally, maybe it would have been, maybe it would have been reversed by that, roles that both me and the business partner lived in, and we just would have pushed forward from it. But I know personally, I probably would have gotten jumbled up at the beginning and started to lose hope in my quest.
Yeah, I think that in my opinion, it correlates a lot to not just business, but even just sales. Mm-hmm. Right? Is that if we look at the conditioned wrestler who's successful in the second and likely the third period, right? In my opinion, the difference is the focus on where they put volume, mm-hmm. right? So like, let's say that they're running stairs for 20 minutes a day and a 5K a day, mm-hmm. right? In the off season, just to stay in shape. Mm-hmm. If we tack that on day after day after day after day, month after month after month, right? The volume of work that's completed mm-hmm. hides flaws. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. So as with you, to me, my strengths were my strength, mm-hmm. right? It was just my absolute strength. I was stronger than most people. I could get out of things really easily. Mm-hmm. It was hard to manipulate my body, right? I could hide flaws in my work ethic, mm-hmm. right? So that, it's that, I tell the sales guys, the number one way to hide your flaws is volume, right? If you want the most or the highest chance of success, the key factor is volume mm-hmm. over everything. Mm-hmm. Volume hides flaws, right? So if we look at that in the wrestling aspect, right? I would assume that the technical wrestler is highly focused on technical skill, right? Mm-hmm. The skill of wrestling, the art of wrestling, etc., and less focused on the conditioning because they're so obsessive about the skill, mm-hmm. right? And they're like, and I would say frequently, I think that those people are very much type A, type B, mm-hmm. right? Where you have somebody that is, I want to focus on skill this much more so that I don't have to condition as hard. Mm-hmm. Right. So they're using it as a if and, mm-hmm. right? Or an if then, mm-hmm. right? If I become the best in my skill, then it's likely that I can win or pin quicker mm-hmm. than the person that has less skill. But the chances of that are so low, mm-hmm. right? I mean, it's like if we have a sales guy or a business owner or an entrepreneur who has, like we discussed, who has the perfect plan, when does it ever happen like that? Never. Like I don't know of any business that has not suffered multiple roadblocks, speed bumps, hiccups, whatever, within the first 3 months, right? Let alone somebody who spends, 10, 20, 30, 40 hours putting together this immaculate business plan and says, this is where I'll be in 1 year, this is where I'll be in 3 years, this is where I'll be in 5 years, and then sticking to that. Like I've mitigated the risk on the paper, but I've not mitigated the real opportunity of risk that could come up. So I look at, like, I don't know of any business personally that's ever been started and run off of a business plan that's written. Every business owner that I know is like, I just went for it.
Yeah. You adapt as you go.
Right.
There's a lot of organic growth that happens inside of the development of a business. So I don't have the same resume that you have where you work directly with business owners as a consultant, but the ones that I know, they very much, the ones that are the most successful are the ones that just kind of, they were willing to do the hard work, right? So that old adage, what it was to say, talent, hard work beats talent when talent
doesn't work hard.
fails to work hard.
It's my favorite quote in the world.
Because the thing about the thing about the technical, like somebody who focuses so incessantly on technique, that's mechanistic, right? The flow of life is not mechanistic. It's not one thing happens and then another thing happens. It's one thing happens into another thing. They flow directly into another. So it's like, how in your business plan are you going to plan for a roadblock? How do you know how to anticipate a roadblock? How do you know what things you don't know?
Right.
And that's, we talked about that before. There's a lot of people who fail to even jump off that proverbial cliff because they're so scared of the unknowns. Right. But if you're not scared of the work, right, you are going to be able to fulfill or succeed. Maybe not win the match, but you will win the second period, and you'll win the longevity. You'll be able to break some milestones in the business world if you're willing to just put in the work and understand that the roadblocks are elevators to your business. It's like hit a roadblock, and it could be something that stops one person, or it could be something that just lifts another person to another dimension of thinking.
So I'm curious your opinion on this. I think that if I'm trying to assimilate the 3-period methodology to business, if I'm putting, because we're putting a lot of focus on the technical wrestler, but if I'm putting the conditioned wrestler, so we'll say the period 2 wrestler against the period 3 wrestler. Right. So in business, I think that could be assimilated to somebody who is well conditioned, meaning experience, right? Who has gone through the trials and tribulations, let's say, in the same line of work that you're entering into. We'll use roofing for an example. Let's compare a roofing company owner who's been doing this and has maintained in the black for a decade. And then new player comes into the picture, you, hypothetically, and you just have an insane amount of heart, right? How does that period business owner beat 10-year period business owner?
It's a good question, because I'm still trying to figure that out. No, I think the person with heart isn't looking at that competition with that conditioned wrestler or that seasoned contractor, so to speak. I don't think they're looking at that as the only win that they want to achieve. If that makes sense, because the person with the heart doesn't just have that grit inside of them to win that singular match. They're in it for a specific purpose, right? In wrestling, it could be that they're trying to prove something to themselves, to conquer their mind. It could be that they want to be the theologian. It could be that they're battling trauma in their childhood and they want to be able to control something in their world. Whatever it is, there's a why factor that's making them have that heart. So when I look at the competitor, that's seasoned, chances are for me, I'm not really looking at that competitor as like that their second period, I'm third period. I'm not really looking at them as my competition. I'm looking at the model of business that I want to be like as my competition, and this is a stepping stone type of thing. So if I'm not putting that much weight in how fast I can conquer this person, I'm giving. Let's just say that's not going to take it out of the tank for me.
So I think so I ask that because when I started my gyms, I would attribute a little bit of, so the first gym I started in my garage in New Mexico in a townhome, right? And it was in this little gated HOA townhome community. And New Mexico state law writes that you can't operate a business out of your home, right? I didn't know that. I was 19, right? So, but I was modeling my business after this guy named Adrian Gonzalez, who owned a gym in New Mexico as well, that was grossly successful, right? And he had a, 45,000 square foot, $5 million facility that all these pro athletes came in and out of. And I wasn't envious, but I admired him, right? I envied the shit he had, right? I was like, I want that stuff because that's dope, right? But there was no negative emotion around it, right? The difference between what drove me in that, which is I think the guy with heart, is I always told people my give a shit factor is way higher than anyone else's, right? So where you may go to this facility and get the best training equipment, the best environment, very good coaches, you're going to go there and leave, and they're going to think about you the next time you come in, right? Whereas you come here, and I was a little bit delusional at that time because I literally treated my garage like it was a $3 million facility. So I was like probably a little overly professional. I had like a check-in system, even though there was only one person in the thing at a time, right? I turfed half of my garage, I rubbered the other half, and it was a little overboard. But what that was a direct correlation of my passion. And I said my selling point to everybody that came was that my give a shit factor was better. My give a shit factor was more because I have so much more to lose, right? So I looked at it like you may come and go from that facility, but you come and go here, and I'm still thinking about how I can make things better constantly, all day, every day, right? So the end product will be better. I may not have the surroundings that make it look better, but I have everything that you need and want, I guess you could say, to give you the service that's worth the same service you'd get over there and more. Right? Because there's that conviction and that, it's hard to compete against people that have been in business for a decade or 15 or 20 years. It's like, what's the separating factor? It's like, I'll care more, right? I give a shit more because everything depends on this. Yeah. Right.
I know that one of my best one-liners, in terms of like closing deals throughout the first couple of years in business, when people would ask me stuff like that, like, I'm up against somebody who's a 20-year contractor or a 50-year contractor or whatever. And they're like, what's the difference between you and them? And my only good response was, somebody said yes to them for their first 20 years. I'm just asking you to say yes to me now so I can get there.
Right.
Right. I mean, I don't think it was delusional for you to check people in and out. To be frank, I think that it was like an external manifestation of that idea that you don't dress for the job you have, you dress for the job that you
Right.
have. Right? It's like you were in, but you're showing it.
Right.
You know, I think there's more to it. There's
Yeah.
symbolism there.
Yeah.
You know, you cut yourself down in the delusional state because it did help you out. Obviously, you
Yeah.
progressed farther and farther and farther, and probably faster than other people did.
Yeah. And I mean, I vividly remember when I finished remodeling and opened my 26,000 square foot facility, which was 7 years later. I unlocked the door, walked in when all the renovations were done, and I just started crying.
Yeah.
And like I'm almost crying now, right? And my wife at the time looked at me and she's like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "Nothing, nothing at all." I was like, it's almost unbelievable because this is what I dreamt about in my garage on Quail Run Loop in New Mexico, right? So, but I think that it's kind of back to that Will Smith quote, right? Of like the difference between you and I is that if we both get on a treadmill and the competition is who's going to get off first, I'll die before I get off the treadmill, right? And that's like in that third period wrestler, that heart person, sometimes that's all they have going for them, right?
But it's more than enough, you know. Well, you think about it too. We haven't given this comparison yet, which is like what happens when you have a very technically sound wrestler who's also very conditioned and who also has a good heart.
They're a national champion.
And then they're up against a person who's technically sound, conditioned and whatnot. And I think that really all it boils down to in that type of matchup in life, business, or wrestling, I think what it boils down to is who has more heart, right? Like it's going to be close, and those one little, you know what I'm talking about in a wrestling match. There's just those one things where it's like you don't even know how you did it. Like you have no idea. You never practiced it. You never, or you did and you weren't very successful, and you just somehow figured out how to flip a switch, and you're in the right position. You score those points at the end of the match, whatever it is. Those things do happen to the person who's willing to give the utmost amount of energy towards it, the most amount of obsessive focus to it as possible. Not every single time. There are times that things don't fall into your lap in that sense, but it's like the law of attraction. It's like the more you think about something and focus on something, the world will, or the universe will align enough to show you the door that you already know how to walk through, right? That kind of stuff. So it's pretty interesting thought process. So I mean, if we were to like summarize everything that we've talked about through the wrestling series, and I realize viewers, not everybody cares about wrestling, but I think that it's very universal concepts that we're talking about. We just experienced in wrestling, so we can speak about it from that perspective. But it's like everything that it's boiled down to is the person who's willing to battle their mental demons, and the person who's willing to give obsessive focus towards something, and the person who has like a I'd rather die than quit mentality will ultimately become victorious in whatever they try to do.
Right.
I think this is really, if you were to summarize all of it, that's the plight of a wrestler. The plight of the wrestler is, will you die before you quit? Will you focus so much that you'll ignore every one of the things inside your body that are trying to save you? Will you ignore those things to meet your goal? And if you're capable of doing that, you'll be successful on the mat, and you'll be successful off the mat.
Right. Yeah, I think that it's the entrepreneurs, in my opinion, are in the business world. If you looked at like I've never met somebody, and albeit my testing pool is probably 6 or 7 people, but I mean, of those 6 or 7 people that have went to school for business, right? Or I'm getting I'm getting my MBA in business, right? And then, they go through that program and I'm like, are you going to start a business? They're like, I didn't really learn much about starting a business. I'm like, right, you learned how to be a great employee.
Yeah.
Right? Most people who go that route, in my opinion, are more risk averse, right? But I think that there's a direct correlation, and I think what we've been talking about, especially in relation to wrestling and what it takes to be successful in wrestling versus average or not successful, is not necessarily people that fear uncomfortability, but who chase it, right? And I think that if the general population knew that, it's like the book by Ryan Holiday, The Obstacle is the Way, right? That most of the time, all the solutions for all of your problems are on the other side of some kind of comfort you're seeking, right? When you have that ingrained in you as a child, in the sport of wrestling, it's such an invaluable lesson for people to learn, right? Like, I personally don't know many people that spent 12, 13, 14, 15 years wrestling that aren't very successful in life in some way. Right.
I look on LinkedIn right now, and people that I know from my wrestling experience, they're holding executive titles, owner titles, or they're like, there's 3 guys, I believe, from my wrestling team in college who are head coaches in college, which is it's a big feat. I mean, you're literally, that's, just being a coach of a college team means you're an expert in that field, and people trust you to run a program that's funded by a university and stuff like that. And it's like, it's I don't know any of them. Well, that's not true. The ones that are on LinkedIn anyways, and the ones that I communicate with, they are. But there are the other ones too. There's a couple of people from my wrestling history who were just impressively talented, but incredibly lazy at the same time. The thing about it is, they're the ones that, they blew up after season was over. They were like, when we say blew up after season was over, it's like they maintained their weight till the season was over, and then all of a sudden gained 500 pounds. It looked like it anyways. It was more like probably 20 or 30, but they didn't have that same grit factor in their mind that said, I want to maintain my physique and I want to maintain my conditioning. They're on constant reset over and over, right? So it's not to say that every person that ever participated in a sport of wrestling really gets to thoroughly reap the benefits, but they understand why the ones that are successful and why they are not. I'm sure of it, unless they're just not aware.
Yeah, I remember I was probably mid-20s or something, and I was talking to Tyler, one of my mentors, and I was just going through a very stressful time in the business. I was growing. I was having like capacity issues in my gym that could have gotten me in trouble with the fire department. And I said to him, when does shit get easier? And he goes, but it only gets harder.
Yeah.
And I was like,
that's the truth.
Right. And I was like, but it's got to get less stressful. And he goes, sure, less stressful, right? Because you have skill sets that you've developed, right? And you continue to hone and hone and hone. But he goes, if you want what you tell me you want, it's just going to get harder, and then harder and harder and harder. And the difference between the people that achieve what you say you want and the ones that don't are the ones that are like, this is too hard now, I'm going to stop. Right. And for me, it's like hearing that, because I knew plenty of wrestling. I mean, I had one of my good friends, Nick, went right before state championships for wrestling in high school. We were 8 days out, and he got on the scale, and he was 41 pounds over.
That's a big number. I've seen like 20s. I've never
41 pounds over.
Yeah.
He wrestled in high school, I think it was 151 or 152, and he weighed in 190 plus.
Yeah.
And my coach looked at him and he was like, what's the deal?
Mm-hmm.
He went back to his family's house out of state and like just binged on pie and crap food, right? And but he was one of those guys. He was insanely talented, but he was also insanely talented at partying, right? And he was insanely talented at chasing things that were not conducive to his success. And to me, I look at it like those guys that take a big break when the season's over and they're like, I'm going to go, assuming college, it's like, I'm going to go party, right? They're the ones that are seeking, like, I can withstand this discomfort for this long, but then I need to go have a release, right? And then I start to lose a little bit of control of that release, right? Because they want some sort of easy way out.
Yeah, Navy SEALs, part of their mantra is the only easy day was yesterday. Right. But do you think about, like, you have friends, and you mentioned them before, that are Navy SEALs. I've had a number of acquaintances that are, of the teams and stuff. And it is really interesting. It's really interesting, their character as a person, because they do chase uncomfortability
all the time.
But they do it on purpose because it's like total preparedness for anything that life throws at you. I think that's a big takeaway from all of this stuff, is like on a mat, you're learning how to battle, and you're winning those small victories all of the time. So you can chase it, but then there has to be that shift in your mind that you're like, I want to chase the uncomfortability for the simple sake, like Dan Gable said it the best, in my opinion. Once you've wrestled, everything else in life is easy. It's like once you've chased every one of these demons as far as you need to chase them, everything else becomes easy, right? Or maybe not easy, but it's attainable. Right. That's what I've noticed in business in general. Is Tyler's right. There's nothing easier about today. Day. I can't even do math right now. But like
something.
Yeah, like 1,500, and or 1,600 or whatever it is, as there was to day one. There's nothing easier. In fact, it's much, much more difficult. But I've chased so many of those uncomfortable things head on throughout all of this that I do have a much bigger sense of ease towards all of the chaos that's going on, because I've gained new and better and more dialed in thought processes, protocols. The failing forward thing, I've actually applied as much as I can to the best of my ability. I can't say I haven't made mistakes, but I've acknowledged those mistakes every time I made them, and I didn't let them repeat.
Right.
And so I think that's the ticket to life. And you see those things on like Instagram and stuff like that, where it's like there's the easy way, and then there's the right way. Right. I'll give you like a drawing and stuff like that, but some of them really, they're truly 100% correct.
Right.
Like we had a consultant who's a sales consultant come in here. I'll mention his name. Maybe he'll give us some clicks, whatever. It was Ryan Groth. He's a big wig in terms of teaching salespeople in the contracting world, because historically contractors have not been the greatest of sales organizations. They're good with their hands. They're not necessarily good at getting their hands in front of people and stuff like that. But anyways, he gave us this little thing, this is a diagram. It's like, okay, you can make this choice. You can ride you decide to eat fast food, right? You eat the fast food and it makes you happy for about this much time. And then it makes you feel like dog shit for this much time. And you have to earn your way back to feeling just baseline. Whereas if you eat healthy food, it makes you uncomfortable for a little while, but then it elevates your health. Right. And you consistently do those things, you stay at a higher plane of being. So there's a lot of ways to look at it. I saw another picture the other day where it's like, you can choose this route, the easy way, because you're going downhill, or the hard way, uphill. But then in order to climb out of it, you got to climb a sheer rock wall to get to the top. Right. It's like you're making life harder for you because you're making easy choices. Like, this one's comfortable, this one's safe, I'm going to do this one. And then when that catches up with you, all that work that the ones of us that are chasing the uncomfortability. You've got to do that at like all at the same time without it being a long 10-year time. You got to do this all at the same time or fail. Fall off the rock wall.
Yep.
Try over again. Fall off the rock wall. Try over again because you got tired.
Yep.
Because you're already kind of, whatever word you want to put in there, right? So,
Yeah, one of my favorite diagram pictures, I guess you could say, is it's like the path to success, right? And it's like a perfectly drawn staircase, right? And it's like what most people want or think. And it's just this guy climbing a staircase, right? And it's like what really happens is, and it's just this line that's like squiggles all over the place. And then it's like 15 years later here, right? But I think that back to your statement on Navy SEALs, like one of my best friends growing up, Rob, right? His name's Rob Tapia. Him and I were inseparable for years. What's wild to me is that when he left for Buds, him and I were consistently skateboarding, TPing people's houses, ding dong ditching, underage drinking, doing all the shit, right?
Like you gotta bring the cat out of the bag. You guys are crazy.
When he got back 6 months later, he was unrecognizable. Not appearance wise, but I literally saw two different human beings. And I was like, what happened to you? And he said, all of the best things that could happen to me happened to me. And he said something to me that I hear David Goggins say a lot, but he said something to me years ago, probably over 15 years ago, that he said, my intention now is to keep my family and my brothers safe and continuously callous my mind. That's it, right? So he was like, he said, the greatest lesson that I learned in Buds is that your mind works exactly like a muscle, right? And if I give it some type of challenging input and to achieve this output, and I do it, then my mind is literally stronger. Measurably, right? And I'll briefly go into this. I read this study last week from Andrew Huberman, who's a neurologist, and it's mind-blowing to me. So there's a study now that proves, and this is a study with over 10,000 people, that your brain releases higher levels of dopamine on a consistent day-to-day basis, completely dependent upon how much you challenge your brain and succeed in the challenge that's at hand. So if you make a commitment of like, I'm going to sit down and finish this puzzle, and it's a really hard puzzle, and you sit there and you finish it, your baseline dopamine level will increase and stay there. So the more of that you do, there's a direct correlation to your general well-being. Right? And this was proven over 5 years when he was obviously giving a placebo of I want you to do X, and then give up on it. And you see an equivalent drop, which is mind-blowing to me, right? So I'm looking at this now and I'm like, oh, okay, so really the secret to happiness, whatever that label is, right, is just to consistently do shit that I don't think I can do.
And do it long enough that you succeed.
And do it long enough that I
Prove
succeed.
yourself you can do it. Right.
And in doing so, right, like in wrestling, constantly challenging yourself because your brain is telling you, I don't think you can do this, or this looks really hard, right? Or CrossFit, same thing, right? Research now shows that you're genuinely improving your brain function by doing that, right? So it's like, I run from comfortability, right? As fast as you can.
Right.
Because it literally makes your brain weaker.
That's wild.
Right.
And that's proven.
It's proven.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it was proven so much so that it was talked about at, I forget which health summit, as a landmark study, which is a pretty big deal to get the notation of a landmark study, because that's saying that like we have proven something that is unresearched before and is now backed by triple blind research that's proven that like, and I look at that as like, that's the antidote to like everything.
Mm-hmm.
Just like,
Well, there's another landmark research thing. This is off topic, but I think we should talk about it. The value of challenging your body. So they've recently, I'm sure you know about this, but they've recently found that there's chemicals that are released into your bloodstream when your muscles break down during exercise that that legitimately, like their health, like they're like antibodies.
yeah,
Right. So you can, by training your body, you can make your body healthier.
right.
Not just in like stronger or
No, general.
aerobic capacity and that kind of stuff, but like you will get sick less.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting, but it's the same concept. It's like the more you challenge yourself, the better you will become at everything, including health.
Everything.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, but imagine a doctor telling you that, right? Like the answer to your depression or the answer to your low self-esteem or the answer to your struggles, I just want you to do really hard shit every day.
Yeah, right. I want you to read a book daily
Right.
for a week.
Right.
Talk again about how much happier you are.
Yeah. Or it's like, you know, like learning a new skill, right? Like I want to learn how to change the fork suspension on my dirt bikes. I don't know anything about it. So I'm going to learn it, try it, maybe succeed at it. Right. But it's like that. It's, you know, the Joe Rogan talks about it. He's like, he said, my goal in life is to constantly challenge my brain. I just want to do hard shit all the time. Right. Because, and now I'm looking at it like that is legitimately like the antidote to everything. It's like, but you look at that on the simplistic, you know, we have young kids. It's like, you know, you get the question of like, Dad, can you help me with this? And my response to my daughter every time is, have you tried yet? And she's like, no, it looks hard. I'm like, okay, I want you to try. Right? Because if you don't try and you rely on me, then you don't build a self-esteem. Right? If you try and fail and then seek help and then try again and succeed, then you build your self-esteem, right? You understand that you're capable, right? But as adults, I mean, research shows now that we continue neuroplasticity until we're like 60. So it's like you can fucking change everything about your life if you want to. You just do hard shit.
Chase. What was it that you said? Chase the uncomfortability.
I like living in a consistent state of discomfort.
Right. So I guess it's time to wrap it up.
Yeah.
So I guess to summarize today's conversation, and also to put a disclaimer out there, I would never say don't practice technique. Okay. Grind your ass off, learn everything, and become great at it. And perfect practice makes perfect, not just practice makes perfect. However, don't skip on conditioning, and find out if you understand your why factor for why you're doing all this stuff. Because if you don't, chances are you're going to lose it.
Yep.
So I hope you guys have enjoyed all of our conversations on the lessons wrestling have taught us. It's really kind of sparked some interest of my own to, you know, to get out, challenge myself, do different things. And also just, it's been nostalgic for me. So I appreciate you guys participate and listen. Let's chase the hard shit.
Yeah. Do the hard stuff.
Take it easy.